Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We're going to give everyone a moment to pop in before we begin the presentation. But as we're waiting for everyone to join us, you may or may not know that on August 1st, our applications went live. Juan, what are you looking forward to? What's your favorite part of reading applications?
I really look forward to reading applications for a couple different reasons. One of my favorite parts about reading applications is getting to know students that I've been working with, getting to know more about them. Sometimes I will meet them on the road when we're able to travel, or maybe I've done a virtual interview with them, and then seeing their application come through and looking at their transcript and reading their essay. I think the essay has to be the most interesting part of it. What about yours?
I have to agree with you. It's definitely the essay, especially for those students that I don't get to meet on the road, right? I've never met them before. It's kind of the first time I hear their voice and feel like I'm really getting to know who they are outside of just the numbers, right? So that's definitely probably my favorite part as well, is just getting to read that essay and learn just a little bit more about the students. Well, I believe most everyone is already in here. So I want us to go ahead and dive in and get started. Juan, do you want to go ahead and kick us off?
Yeah, just want to welcome everyone this afternoon to our last installment of Learning Tuesdays. This is the 12th one that we've done. And we're going to wrap up talking about Trinity admissions and financial aid. We're going to take a deep dive into this. And my name is Juan Perez. I am an associate director of admissions here at Trinity. And I've been at Trinity for a little while. I used to be a student here. I'm originally from Quito, Ecuador. I was born and raised in Quito, and after I graduated from high school in 2007, I moved to San Antonio. That was the first time I ever came to Texas, and I moved here to start at Trinity. I had an amazing 4 years as a student, majored in business with a double concentration in finance and marketing. And then I graduated in 2011. And I've been working in the admissions office ever since I graduated. So it's 9 years this summer this month actually, since I started working at Trinity. And I've worked with students from lots of different places, but I currently work with students from the Pacific Northwest, from Latin America, from the Middle East, and from South Asia.
Congratulations on the work anniversary. I didn't realize you were coming up on 9 years. That's super exciting. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Michaela Nip. I'm an assistant director of admissions at Trinity, and this is actually starting my 5th year. But I'm also an alum of the institution. I graduated with a degree in ancient Mediterranean studies. Yes, that is a real degree. I promise I have a diploma in my office. It falls under the classical studies department. And it was really exciting during my time at Trinity, getting to study abroad in Athens, Greece for a full semester, getting to do research on ancient manuscripts. But the whole time I was a student, I was interning in the admissions office. So I'm super excited to now be a staff member, like I said, going on my 5th year. The students that I work with predominantly are students in the Austin area. So hello to all the students joining us today from Austin. And out of state, I work with students primarily from Tennessee and Colorado. Just so you guys know, we do have a Q&A option, a question and answer option here. Please feel free to drop in any questions you have during the presentation. We'll leave plenty of time at the end to try and address as many as we can. We can also ask questions throughout, and we'll try and get to those as we can. So thank you guys so much for joining us, and we'll go ahead and get started. So first things first, I hope you enjoy our picture here of Leroy. He is our mascot, the Tigers, diving into a pool. We thought this was perfectly fitting for our presentation today. As Juan mentioned, this is the final installment of our Learning Tuesday webinar series. So whether this is your first one or 5th one that you're attending, we're really glad you're joining us to learn a little bit more about Trinity. Today, like Juan said, we're going to deep dive into specifically Trinity admissions and financial aid. So we'll cover how you apply, what our applicant pool looks like, what the deadlines are, admissions requirements and selection criteria. And then of course, we'll dig a little bit more into the admissions, financial aid and scholarship side of things as well. So kind of use that as a roadmap for our presentation today.
Well, and we're going to start with the applications. This is the very first step in the admissions process. Up on the screen, you see the three applications that Trinity accepts: Common App, Coalition for College, and Apply Texas. We do not have a preference, so it is whichever application you want to submit, and we recommend that you look at the list of universities that you're applying to and see if there are a lot of them on the Common App or Coalition, or a lot of them that accept Apply Texas. So whatever is easiest for you works for us. We want to make sure that our application is really accessible, and we definitely don't want to add more obstacles to this process. So any of these three applications work for us. And like Michaela mentioned at the very beginning, all of these have gone live. So if you're a rising senior, which I believe most of you are, you can start completing your application, logging into these different websites and filling that information in. You might be pleased to hear that at Trinity, we don't require any additional materials, or we don't have an application fee. So again, trying to not add any obstacles to the actual applications, any barriers, trying to make it as accessible as possible. So feel free to start checking out these websites and filling out your application.
Juan, we actually had a question come in that I think might be able to be addressed right here, which is if there's any differences between the different applications other than the essay prompts. That's a great question.
Yes, there are some differences, and I think most of them are about how user friendly they are. I would say Common App might be the most user friendly. Coalition's pretty user friendly as well, and they're pretty comprehensive applications. In my opinion, Apply Texas maybe is a little bit less streamlined, less easy to use, but it is still not difficult. Again, if most of the colleges that you're applying are in Texas and accept Apply Texas, that might be just fine. What do you think, Michaela?
No, I think that makes sense. With Common App and Coalition, there are options to upload other materials pretty seamlessly into your application, like essays, letters of recommendation, things like that. Whereas with Apply Texas, it's a little bit more involved. So again, not challenging, just worth knowing that it might just be a little bit different when you're submitting your application materials. But for us, we're getting pretty much the same information out of all of these application platforms. So just like Juan said, once you build out your list, it's better to work smarter, not harder. If all of your schools are on one application platform, please utilize that platform. It might make more sense just to submit one in its full entirety, or fill out one in its full entirety, as opposed to having to do every single one of them and re-enter the same information multiple times. We don't have a preference on our end. So it's really up to you, the colleges you're applying to, and your preferences.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thanks for asking. Here in this slide, you can get an idea of what type of students in our applicant pool, what we're seeing each year. On the screen, you're seeing numbers for fall of 2019. So these are last year's applicants. We have seen in the last few years a huge increase in the number of applications that we've received. For the class of 2019, we received almost 10,000 applications, which was twice the number as we received 5 years ago. So a huge increase in not a lot of time. And at Trinity, we are not trying to increase the number of students that we have. We're not trying to grow as a university. So this has made our acceptance rate a little bit more competitive. So you see the acceptance rate was 29%, and in the bottom, the little blue ovals there, you can get a little bit more information of the type of student that we were admitting.
And I think it's really important when you see those numbers in those blue boxes. I think sometimes with stats and with numbers, there's this tendency for them to feel really stagnant and that there's not really a story behind the numbers. And so I definitely want to kind of unpack these and provide a little bit of context. So Juan and myself are both application readers. So we actually read applications every single year. In fact, this year I read over 500 applications, something like that. And so we like to really dig into each application, read them holistically, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, what that really looks like and what we're reviewing. But I know for me, when I open up an application to read it, once I see who the student is, where they're from, their high school, the very first thing I do is go to their high school transcript and really dig into that. And the reason is that we've worked really closely with our institutional research department. And what we found is that the best indicator of academic success at Trinity is in fact a student's high school GPA alongside the rigor of the courses that they've taken during their time in high school. So because of that, that's really where I spend a bulk of my review. And I'm looking at a transcript and I'm actually recalculating a student's GPA. And there's really no mystery behind how we're doing that. Really what we're doing is taking a GPA and putting it into a 4.0 unweighted scale, just looking at the core academic solid courses. We call them the 5 food groups of admissions. So math, science, social science, English, and foreign language. So those are the courses we're looking at in that recalculated GPA. Now that average there is at 3.73. That's the average of our admitted students, but we're also looking at rigor in that context. We're looking at you within the context of your specific high school. Every high school is different. They offer different types of courses. Some schools offer dual credit, some offer IB, some offer AP, some don't offer any of those. So context within that GPA is also very important. In terms of testing averages that you see up there, the first thing I want to mention is that starting this year, Trinity has gone test optional. And we're going to dive into that a little bit more later in the presentation. So this information is based off of last year's applicant pool where we did require test scores. You can see the averages there. Those are super scored test scores. That means we did take the best sub-test scores and combine them together for the highest possible composite, both for the ACT and the SAT. Now, I know that this presentation shows those averages in really big, bold lettering there, but really I think it's the average range underneath that kind of shares a bigger picture. The average ACT may have been a 31.4, but the middle 50% was a 30 to a 33. And what that tells me is that a quarter of our admitted students were above a 33, but a quarter of our admitted students also fell below a 30. There's a wide range involved there. And typically, if students were falling outside of our testing averages, they had a really solid GPA with rigor to compensate for that. So it's just a little context into those numbers, that the numbers aren't just completely stagnant. But I'll let Juan kind of dive now into the composition of that first year class, not just in the numbers, but in other capacities.
Yeah, so from the number of students that we admit, it's always our goal to enroll a class of 640 first-year students. And last year, in the class of 2019, that started in 2019, we ended up with 646. So right there on our target, and we are really, really proud of the composition of those students. It is a really, really diverse class, and that's something that we always aim to achieve. And diverse in all senses of the word. I mean, race and ethnicity, gender, geographic diversity, students from both rural and urban communities, a lot of religious diversity, socioeconomic diversity. We have a solid number of first generation students, just a lot of diversity of thought, which is really important to the Trinity experience.
All right, so we talked a little bit about how you apply to Trinity and also kind of what the applicant pool looked like and our incoming classes looking like. So now we're probably going to dive into when do you apply? That's probably a question coming up. When do I submit my application? So as you can see up here on the screen, we do have 2 application deadlines and 4 decision plans. So our 2 application deadlines are November 1st and February 1st. And on each of those deadlines, we have a binding and a non-binding application decision plan. And Juan's going to dive a little bit more into that binding early decision agreement. But as you can see, we have early decision, early action, and regular decision application options. And I know that that was a question that came in. And so we do have those different decision plans you can apply under. Something that I wanted to point out is that although our applications did open on August 1st, the way we review applications is we wait until the application deadline to start reviewing, and we review applications en masse, and we release our decisions en masse as well. And so if you're an eager beaver and you've submitted your application August 1st, you've gotten all your materials in, and you're applying under our November 1st deadline, you're still going to be waiting until about December to get your admissions decision. So just some context there in case you're like, wait, why haven't I gotten my admissions decision yet? No stress on that at all. You'll be notified around the decision notification date. And now I'll turn it over to Juan to kind of dive into that early decision application option.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about early decision because this is can be a really powerful application plan. And students are often really curious about what it means. Early decision is binding. That means that if you apply early decision, you are making a commitment. You're signing a contract saying that if you are admitted to that university, you are making a commitment to enroll there. So you have to be really, really sure that that is the place that you want to be. That is the university that you want to study at. And the way to determine this is to make sure if that's your best academic fit, your best financial fit, and your best social fit. Those three different things. And to determine your academic and social fit, you can do a variety of different things. For example, what you're doing right now, attending one of these virtual sessions to learn a little bit more about the university. We have virtual information sessions and virtual tours right now. Hopefully in the future, we'll be able to open campus and you can see the beautiful campus for yourself. Another thing that you can take advantage of now is reaching out to professors and talking to them. All their contact information is on our website. You can talk to current students. If you know any students that go to Trinity, definitely feel free to reach out to them and ask for their experience. But if you don't know anybody, feel free to reach out to your admissions counselor and we'll be happy to connect you with them. So if you've determined best fit academically and best fit socially, the last thing to determine is the financial fit. And this is an important component because like I mentioned earlier, if you apply early decision, you're making a commitment to enrolling there. So you have to make sure that the finances are going to work. So how do you do that? That's a big question, right? On the right-hand side of the screen, that green box, we have listed a couple of tools that you can use. On our website, we have a list of scholarships and the net price calculator, so you can do a little bit of research and see what scholarships and financial aid you might be eligible for, you might qualify for. The net price calculator actually lets you input your academics, your family's finances, and it'll give you a pretty accurate estimate of what your comprehensive financial aid package is going to look like. We also do financial aid estimates. So if you're serious about applying early decision, but you're unsure about the financial component, feel free to talk to your assigned admissions counselor. You will then be able to submit your financial forms ahead of time. And before you submit your application, you'll know exactly what your financial aid package is going to be like. So if you've determined that Trinity is your best academic, financial, and social fit, applying early decision can be a really, really good option. It has some nice benefits. First of all, you get to distinguish yourself in a much smaller applicant pool. I mentioned in one of the previous slides that Trinity sees about 10,000 applicants for 640 spots in any given year. So applying early decision puts you in a much smaller applicant pool. We only see about 300 early decision applicants each year. So you are one of 300 as opposed to one of almost 10,000. So that in and of itself helps. But we also take in consideration the big commitment that you're making to the university. For us, the fact that you're telling us that you definitely want to enroll here means a lot. And the acceptance rate tends to be higher. So the acceptance rate for early decision applicants is close to 65% compared to about the 29% that we see for the regular applicant pool. So again, if Trinity is the place that you want to be at, early decision can be a really, really good option for you.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about the selection criteria. So basically the things that we're reviewing when we do read applications. So one of the other Learning Tuesday sessions that we've hosted was actually one about holistic review. And I actually was part of that session as well. So if you want to dive into that even more, you can definitely go and watch that webinar if you have not already. But I do want to just briefly cover what a holistic review means for us. And really what that means is that every single box you see up on that screen is something that we are taking into consideration when we're making an admissions decision. And so we're going to just touch on each of these boxes really briefly to give you an idea of kind of what we're looking for and what we're reviewing when we're trying to make an admissions decision. So of course, the first thing is the application itself. And so with that, you do get some demographic information, who the student is, where they're coming from. But within the application itself is the essay. We only require the essay that's attached to the application. We don't require any supplemental essays or anything like that, like Juan mentioned, and co-curricular involvement. So those two pieces of the puzzle, if you were listening in at the beginning of the presentation, you might have heard that those are some of Juan and my favorite parts of reading applications, is actually the essay and learning about what a student is doing outside of the classroom. In the essay itself, we get to learn a little bit more about a student that maybe we can't learn about anywhere else in the application. Maybe there's not a space for it. And sometimes the essay is our first real introduction to who a student is, especially if we haven't had the opportunity to meet with them. And so we're getting to, like I said, hear their voice, hear their story, just learn a little bit more about them, really bringing that human element to the process. In terms of co-curricular involvement, we're really just trying to figure out what you're doing outside of the classroom. That's going to look so different for every student. It could be being heavily involved in music since you were in middle school, or maybe playing a sport since the moment you could kick a ball. But it could also be having a job after school, or maybe even taking care of a sibling. We're just trying to figure out how you're spending your time, especially being an institution that cares so much about community and community fit. We're definitely looking to see how you'll be an active member of our community if you were to become a Tiger. In terms of co-curricular involvement, I always like to emphasize, for me anyway, it's definitely about depth and not breadth. I definitely don't think every student needs to be involved in every single organization their school offers. Sometimes it's great to see, hey, you can tell that the student was really passionate about this one or two organizations that got really involved in it. So again, just trying to see what a student is doing outside of the classroom setting. Next up, you see the high school transcript. And like I mentioned before, this is really where most of us spend a bulk of our time in the application review. If every box up here was actually in a pie chart, I would say the high school transcript probably takes up the largest slice of the pie in terms of weight that we put on it. So the high school transcript is very important. But again, we are looking at you within the context of your specific high school. In terms of standardized test score, there's a big asterisk there right now because starting this year, we are going test optional for the next 3 years. I'm going to dive into that in the next slide, so I'm not going to talk too much about that right now, but just know if you submit test scores, they will be reviewed with your application, but you also have the opportunity to be reviewed without test scores.
We also want to see your secondary school report. And this is a specific form that you have to have your high school counselor, your college counselor, your guidance counselor complete on your behalf. And this form gives us some contextual information on your high school that will help us contextualize your academics, your transcript, and get to know a little bit more of your educational background. Your counselor also has the option of attaching a letter of recommendation. We want to see a teacher evaluation as well. And this is a little bit more self-explanatory. It is an evaluation from a teacher. If you submit Common App or Coalition, it is also a specific form that your teacher has to complete, just letting us know a little bit about how they know you. But of course, they can submit an actual letter of recommendation as well. And the last thing that we consider is engagement. Engagement can mean a lot of different things, but it basically means how you've interacted with us in this process. And the reason why we consider that is because we want to make sure that when we are reviewing your application, we know you as best we can to make a good admissions decision. So it's not mandatory, but we encourage students to engage with us in a variety of different ways. One of the best ways to do that is through doing an interview. We do informational interviews, which again, let us know a little bit about you. And it's a two-way street. You can ask questions. You should ask questions about Trinity. It is not an evaluative interview where we're asking you some maybe trick questions and we're seeing how you respond to that at all. So I definitely encourage you to interview with your admissions counselor if you haven't done that already. Other forms of engagement are visiting campus, which right now, for the time being, you can't physically visit campus, but doing virtual events, virtual information sessions, virtual tours, all that kind of stuff are ways that you can engage with us throughout this process.
Okay, so I know this is a big question that we've been getting, is just to dive a little bit more into test optional and really what that means for Trinity. And so actually back in March, we made the announcement that we are going test optional for students applying as first years in the fall 2021 semester. And what that means is that we're no longer requiring those students to submit any standardized test results to us. So that's a little bit of a change of pace from past years. And I think a big reason why we made that decision was definitely because testing has become a little scarce. Some of our students have not had the opportunity to sit down and take either the ACT or the SAT just due to everything that's been going on with COVID. And so it didn't seem fair to ask students to submit something that they might not even be able to have the opportunity or access to take before the application deadlines commence. So we are going to be test optional for a 3-year period, and then we're going to be reevaluating after that 3-year period. And the very first thing I want to emphasize is that this year and moving forward with test optional, we're not making any assumptions as to why a student isn't submitting test scores to us. That is a completely personal reason. We're not assuming, oh, a student didn't submit test scores, so they must be low, right? There could be many reasons why a student isn't submitting test scores. Maybe they didn't have the opportunity to take either of the exams, or maybe they were planning on taking it again to hopefully improve their scores and didn't have that opportunity, or students simply feel that it's not reflective of their abilities, and that's totally fine. You're still going to be completely considered for admission and for merit scholarship and everything. So do not stress about not submitting test scores if that's the path that you so choose. You can, of course, still submit test scores to us, and we're still going to be super scoring, but now it's an option for our students to decide how they want to be reviewed. And I'm sure we're going to get quite a few questions about, well, then how do I know if I should submit test scores or not? And a lot of that is going to be personal for the student, right? It's really up to you to say, hey, do I feel like the test scores I have are reflective of my ability? I think some of our students will probably use our middle 50% as a rule of thumb for submitting test scores to us. But I also think your assigned admissions counselor is a great resource if you're really not sure what direction to go. We have about a dozen admissions counselors in our office. We work with different parts of the United States, different parts of the world. And so if you're not sure who your counselor is, we actually have a section on the website that outlines exactly which counselor works with which territories. And so I would highly encourage you to reach out to your specific counselor if you're not really sure if applying test optional is right for you or if you should be submitting test scores. So when students do submit their applications to Trinity, they'll have the opportunity to opt in or opt out of going test optional. And the most important takeaway from that is you have up until your application deadline to change your mind. So for example, if you're applying November 1st, you have up until November 1st to decide if you want to be opted in or opted out of test optional. After that application deadline, you cannot change your mind. So that's a really important distinguishing factor, that if you're not sure, make sure that you have given us a decision on that by November 1st, but it will be in your application as well. You just have the opportunity to change your mind up until your application deadline. So those are just a few of those high level points about test optional, some of those big questions that I know that we're getting. Juan, did I miss anything about test optional?
I don't think so. I think that was pretty comprehensive. If there are any questions, again, we'll address those at the end. Now we're going to transition a little bit from the application process to cost and financial aid, because I know that this is big on everyone's mind and throughout the process. So first, let's talk about the cost of attendance at Trinity, and you can find that on the left-hand side of your screen. Our total cost of attendance is comprised of tuition and fees. It's comprised of room and board. At Trinity, we have a residency requirement. Students have to live on campus for 3 years. So you can expect to incur those room and board costs for the first 3 years. And even when you're a senior, and if you choose to live off campus, there's still going to be housing expenses that you're going to have to incur. But the first two line items, tuition and fees and room and board, that makes up our direct cost of attendance. But to that, we add $2,400 in indirect costs to give us our total cost of attendance of $62,596 per year. The indirect costs are, that's an amount that Trinity is not going to bill you for, but it's an amount that we build into our cost of attendance because those are expenses that you can expect to incur in any given year. That's an average of what our students incur. Indirect costs include books. So depending on the courses that you take each semester, the cost of textbooks might be different. It includes travel expenses, which those are going to be different if you are driving in from Austin, or if you are flying in from New York City or from Rome. Those are going to be different costs. It also includes personal expenses that you are undoubtedly gonna have throughout the year. And that again gives us the total cost of attendance. There is an opportunity to work on campus to offset some of those indirect costs. So keep that in mind as well. On the right-hand side of your screen, you have a formula that universities and Trinity use for financial aid. So the cost of attendance, which is that number there on the left, minus the expected family contribution, otherwise known as EFC. The EFC is a measure of your family's financial strength, and it is calculated according to a formula established by law, by the government. So it is not a number that Trinity determines or any specific university determines. It is what the government expects your family to be able to contribute for your college education for 1 year. So the cost of attendance minus the EFC gives us your demonstrated financial need. And that demonstrated financial need is what Trinity is going to try to cover to make it accessible and affordable for you to enroll here.
All right, so now we're going to dive more into some of our merit-based scholarship opportunities. So on that left side, that left-hand box, you see our academic merit scholarships. So students are automatically considered for these merit scholarships with their application. They do not have to send us anything additional, no additional essays, no additional letters of recommendation. And this is all of our students, whether you're applying with or without test score, you're automatically considered for these merit-based scholarships. There is more information available on our website about these scholarships, but the primary consideration here is going to be that recalculated core GPA that I mentioned, test scores if they're submitted, and then other components that are considered in that holistic holistic review that we mentioned, for example, rigor of courses that are offered. And like I said, our website goes into more depth on that, and your admissions counselor can also dive into that a little further. But just for context, our scholarships do range from about $12,000 a year to $30,000 a year, renewable all 4 years. On the right-hand side, you see specialized scholarships. So these are scholarship opportunities that do have a separate either application component, maybe an interview component, audition, or maybe invitation component to them. So I'll just very briefly go through these. The Trinity Tower Scholars Award is a full tuition scholarship competition. For this one in particular, I do want to mention you have to apply under our November 1st deadline. And typically the students that are invited are our Murchison scholars or other top scholars. The STEM scholarship is for students interested in the STEM field, so science, technology, engineering, math areas of study. That is a scholarship you do apply for, and that is for a full tuition plus a research stipend. Baker Duncan is for some of our fine arts. So for example, theater, debate, art, and there typically is an audition or portfolio component to that. The music scholarship is for students interested in pursuing music at Trinity in some capacity, and there is an audition component for that one as well. Both Baker Duncan and the Music Award go up to $10,000 a year. But again, those do have separate application components, and all of the information is available on our website.
And last but not least, we offer generous need-based financial aid. In order to apply for need-based financial aid, you need to submit these 2 forms. The first one is the FAFSA, which stands for Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And this is a form that any university that awards federal aid needs to receive from you. Additionally, we request and require this other form called the CSS profile. CSS stands for College Scholarship Service. And this is a form that you can find on the College Board page. And Trinity uses this form in order to award our own institutional financial aid dollars. So this is not an either or. You should submit both of these forms in order to receive the maximum amount of financial aid that you are eligible for. You can start submitting these forms beginning October 1st of your senior year. So they are not quite ready for you to start filling them out just yet. You can start doing that on October 1st. The financial aid process is completely separate and independent from the admissions process. So it won't impact that, and you do not have to abide by the same deadlines, November 1 or February 1. The sooner that you submit these to us, again, they go live on October 1st, the sooner that you can submit them to us, the sooner that we can give you a comprehensive and final financial aid award, the maximum that you qualify for. It's something that I also want to note about these is you do not have to submit these forms if you are not interested for need-based financial aid. If you are just looking for merit scholarships, you do not need to submit the FAFSA or the CSS profile. However, if you are unsure, I would definitely err on the side of submitting them. The worst thing that can happen is you find out that you're not eligible for any, but you might be eligible for a little bit. If you don't submit them, those doors are closed. By submitting them, at least the doors are open, and you can see if you qualify for any of them.
Okay, so this last slide here is really the end of our presentation before we open up to the Q&A. I know we have a lot of questions coming in, so we're excited to get to those. But this is just talking about next steps. Again, this is the final installment of our Learning Tuesday webinar series. So after you've learned all these amazing tips and tricks of the application process, you might feel excited and ready to go ahead and start tackling the application. And if so, you can go to that first link and begin to start submitting that or filling it out. Any questions along the way, like I mentioned, definitely reach out to us or to your assigned admissions counselor. That second link there is really our webpage for virtual opportunities. We're continuing to grow and improve our virtual programming. This year, we're going to add in even more virtual options, hopefully including some interactions with faculty and with current students and things like that. And so if you want to stay up to date with our virtual content, please, please, please go to that website with a forward together. You can also keep up with us on all of our social pages. We're pretty active on all of those, sharing a lot of stories and profiles about current students, about alumni, about incoming students. And it's also a great way to stay up to date with what we're doing in terms of COVID, or when our campus might be open again for visitors, which right now is a little up in the air. And so staying involved on our social will actually kind of give you that inside peek and inside access into some of those opportunities. But thank you so much for joining us. I want to go ahead and get into our Q&A portion. We've got a lot of questions right now. We might not be able to get through every single one of them. And if so, please, please, please go ahead and just shoot us an email. We'd be more than happy to tackle those questions one off if we're not able to get to them. But Juan, I'm going to go ahead and start throwing some questions your way, if that's okay. We actually had a handful of questions about financial aid in terms of international students. And Juan, I was hoping you can speak a little bit to what that process looks like.
Yes, absolutely. So glad that that question was asked, because Trinity does offer both merit scholarships and need-based financial aid for international students. The merit scholarships are pretty similar to those offered to U.S. citizens. So they range up to about $30,000 per year, and they are only based on academic achievement. We also offer need-based financial aid. International students are not eligible for federal student aid, so there's no need to submit the FAFSA, but you do need to submit the CSS profile. So if you submit the CSS profile, that will let us know your financial aid eligibility, and we would be able to evaluate you for that. We meet need for international students. So that means if you're admitted to Trinity, you're going to get the scholarship that you need in order to attend Trinity. However, for international students, we are need sensitive, which means that we do take in consideration how much money you need in order to make admissions decisions, because we do have a limited amount of financial aid dollars.
Great, that's a great question. So I was getting questions about how do you find your admissions representative? So actually on our website, if you just type in like admissions, counselor admissions representatives, or go to the admissions tab, you'll be able to find us. And like I said, it has all of our names listed out in the different areas that we cover. Another question that we got has to do with just the applicant polls in general and the differences between like regular decision, early action, the difference in the sizes, difference in acceptance rates. Juan, do you want to kind of tackle that a little bit?
Yeah, I would say that the majority of our applicants apply November 1. And maybe I can go back to the slide just for visual aid. The majority of our applicants apply either early decision 1 or early action, so by November 1. This is not you don't have to apply early, but we do recommend that you do it for a variety of different reasons. First of which is you get the process done early in your senior year, you get a decision before the holidays, and you can have peace of mind for the rest of your senior year. Typically, the students that apply by November 1 are students that, of course, have started the process earlier. So they might have all of their documents early, and typically that means that they are, I would say, more on top of everything. So their academics might reflect that. And the academic quality of the early pool is a little bit higher. However, there are many reasons why students might wait for until February 1 to submit an application. For example, if you want us to consider your first senior year, first semester grades, you might want to wait till February 1st. But otherwise, I would definitely recommend that you apply by November 1, either early decision, if you know that Trinity is where you want to be, or early action.
Perfect. And Juan, before I answer this next question, I think if you go back to the first slide, I tried to update it so it has our email addresses on there. Not sure if that might come over or not, but hopefully it does. But while we're doing, Oh, we'll make you go out of it first. That's okay. So really quickly, for the SAT and ACT, I had the question on if we have a preference between the two, and we do not have a preference between the two. And you are welcome to self-report your test scores. You do not have to go through the testing agencies to report that to us. You can actually self-report it on your application itself. So that's a really great question as well. I guess another question that we had has to do with, can you be eligible for both merit scholarship and financial aid? Yes, you can definitely be eligible for both of those things. We got a question about how you know what you qualify for merit-based aid. Our website is updated with information for this year's scholarships. It gives you a really good starting point there. But you can also reach out to your admissions counselor. And then, of course, if you are accepted into Trinity, it's actually in your acceptance letter. It says, hey, congrats, you're in, and here's your merit-based scholarship. So it does mention that in your acceptance letter. I know that we weren't able to show you our email addresses, but I wonder if we just say them, if that might be helpful. So my email address is going to be my first name dot last name at trinity.edu. So michaela.nip@trinity.edu. So if there's any questions we haven't gotten to, you can reach out to me through email.
Yeah, and that's Trinity makes that easy because it's our first and last name, first name, period, last name at trinity.edu. So you can see the spelling of the name here. My email address is Juan, Juan.Perez, Perez, @trinity.edu.